Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody had lunch. Doing well. So this is our criminal justice workshop meeting. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what we want to accomplish today. Before I introduce my panelists, all of them have great expertise in what they do, and any one of them could get up here and do an hour and a half on what they do for a living and their departments and the law and how they function within the criminal justice system. But when I thought about what I wanted to do for our conference, I wanted to do something just more practical rather than having lots of slides with lots of statistics and numbers. And I wanted you to get something practical that you could go home with that might be helpful, particularly if you've got a loved one with a case. And so I've already apologized to our guests. I'm going to give them each 10 minutes. And then we're going to open it up for Q&A at the end. If you have questions, write them down. We're going to do 15 minutes at the end for Q&A, but each of them is going to give you a brief overview of their job, who they are, what they do, and how they function within the criminal justice system and how their programs function within the criminal justice system. And then maybe some practical tips on how families can access these kinds of services, or if it's not an access thing, what kind of information you can provide to attorneys to help. So I'd like to introduce my friends and panelists. Gilbert Wright is the director for the Mental Health Division for the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Carolyn Goodson is a deputy public defender, and she is program manager for the Rapid Diversion program. Dr. Clemens Hong on the end is I think you're the permanent interim director now of the Office of Diversion and Reentry. We have to have a new title for you, Clemens. So he's the director of ODR, whose mission has changed through the years, and he can talk about what that is. And hopefully our representative from the Department of Mental Health will be here shortly. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Gilbert Wright, and he will talk about mental health diversion and the mental health division of the District Attorney's Office, which I think is the only mental health division in a DA's office in the state.
As far as I know.
As far as I know.
District attorneys throughout the state, and I haven't seen it. So. But thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. And Mark, I think is not telling you the truth. He actually said I can have an hour and a half to bore you with, so I won't. But I won't keep you, that's right. So without further ado, I've been a deputy district attorney for 34 years and run the gamut of assignments. And I was appointed to the mental health division in 2019, largely because of what resulted out of the help me out with that. The
alternative to incarceration.
No, the thing that Jackie Lacey started along
the Criminal Justice Mental Health Advisory.
Correct. And out of that came a lot of discussions about ODR, which we'll talk about very quickly, and other things that we're doing in our mental health space. And the current DA has continued in that process as well. So without further ado, we can go to the next slide. We're going to go through this very briefly. This is just the org chart of what goes on in our mental health division. We oversee a couple of other units that we've subsumed. Can you go to the next slide? This is our mission statement. It is in our mental health division, we are prosecutors, but we don't prosecute in the traditional sense, meaning we're not going to court, we're not filing cases. We're just taking the cases as they come, and we're trying to determine whether or not individuals can get treated in a mental health facility as opposed to jail. And we do that, though we try to keep in mind public safety, and that's the operative phrase. When I first joined up, I thought we were going to see a whole lot of low-level cases. That's not what we're seeing. A lot of the cases we get are people who are stabbing other people, who are doing some very serious offenses. It's not to say that they're not living with a mental illness, but we have to be very careful when we're talking about putting individuals in an unlocked facility as opposed to jail.
Excuse me, Gilbert, would you mind speaking a little bit closer to the mic?
Oh, sure. Okay. Thought I had my outside voice on. Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. So let's start all over again. No, just kidding. So that's what we do in our mental health. That's our mission statement, and it's challenging. It is very challenging. So next slide. These are the units we've subsumed: our alternate sentencing courts and our psychiatric section and our Office of Diversion and Reentry Court. And we also handle mental health diversion motions. Next slide. Oops, sorry. This will be available for you. I think you'll be able to get this, right? This is what happens in our alternate sentencing court. Generally, you have to plead to get into this court, although they are taking some aspects of diversion in them as well. I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are the various courts we have. Drug court, don't really have drug court anymore since Prop 47, but all the other courts are still in existence. Women's Reentry, Veterans Court, next slide. And generally, like I said, you have to plead to get into these courts. And, but we are trying to get some mental health diversion motions through there as well. Next slide. And that's essentially it for our alternate, what is it? Our alternate
Incompetence.
No, can you go back? I'm sorry. I'm going so fast. Our alternate sentencing courts. Sorry about that. Our ASC. Now the psychiatric section is the court where we take individuals who, where there's a doubt that's declared as to their competency to stand trial. Whenever there's a doubt that's declared, the proceedings are suspended, and then the individuals eventually go to our mental health court, which is out in Hollywood. When you go there, it maybe takes about a couple of weeks, and there's a determination as to whether or not the person is incompetent to stand trial. If they are incompetent to stand trial, then they go either to the state hospital or certain aspects in the ODR. Certain aspects of ODR are there, and we'll talk about that. But you go to get your competency restored. If you get your competency restored, then you come back to the criminal court where you, generally where you left off. So if a doubt was declared at the preliminary hearing, then you come back if your competency is restored, and we do the preliminary hearing. If your doubt was declared at the time of trial, then you come back and we either go to trial or we come up with some other kind of disposition. And that's essentially the psychiatric section. Next slide. Office of Diversion and Reentry was also something that was discussed in the 2012, 2015, 2012 discussions with all of our justice partners. And I know Dr. Hong will talk more about that. Next slide. He'll also probably talk to you about their mission. This slide I normally give to our other prosecutors and also other groups that are not completely aware of what we do, and generally not when there's a defense attorney and then there's Dr. Hong here, so I have to explain everything to him. But Dr. Hong will explain to you what the Office of Diversion and Reentry is. Suffice to say, though, they eventually established a court that is downtown, and we staff that court. Can you go to the next slide? And the way you get into this court, initially you had to plead to get into this court. And you had to, the requirements to get into, you had to be in custody, homeless, must suffer a serious mental illness, and there has to be a negotiated plea. When I talk about the process, the strikes and stuff, that's inside the ballpark stuff. But that's generally what our defense attorneys and our prosecutors will try to work out. If we strike a strike, one of the serious felonies, then someone can get into ODR. A person can commit a serious felony and also get into ODR. One of the great things about ODR, which I will tell you, even when there's times when I disagree about people going into ODR, and this is how you really change the paradigm and how you're treating mental illness, is that you can stay there for the rest of your life if you want to. We can't force people to stay there, but you can stay there for the rest of your life. So we understand when you're living with a mental illness, once your probation is up or once your diversionary stint is up, that doesn't mean your mental illness is going away, obviously. But the answer is generally not to say, okay, now you can go on your own, because then people will decompensate. And we've seen people decompensate rather quickly at times. But ODR, and as far as I know, I gather there might be some other places, but ODR, as far as I know, is one of the entities that actually keep people there for the rest of their life if they want to stay. When we started the ODR court, it was just downtown, but then we realized, the court realized how great it was, so it went countywide. That's what we mean by the ODR hub courts. So now we have an ODR court at Airport. They handle all the cases from our South Bay. And we had an ODR court in Van Nuys, but then it came back to downtown. So we're handling ODR cases downtown as well as from Van Nuys. But there is talk that the Van Nuys court will go back to Van Nuys soon. Next slide. And this is the meat of what we're talking about, our mental health diversion statute. This is where people can come and get mental health diversion. If they meet all the requirements established in PC 1001.36. Those are the requirements. I won't go through all of them. But suffice it to say, if you meet those requirements, and generally where we have the biggest issues is whether or not you pose some kind of unreasonable risk of danger. But if you don't pose an unreasonable risk of danger and you meet all the rest of the requirements, then you get to go into a mental health facility and get treated there. Next slide. When it was established in June of 2018, you could get mental health diversion for any crime, for any offense, including murders. But in November of 2018, it was decided we need to have some exclusions, and these were all the exclusions. So if you're charged with a murder or voluntary manslaughter, you can't get mental health diversion, as well as all the other items that we've listed there. Next slide. And that's it. So if you have any questions,
We're going to hold the questions until the end. Carol, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. I had some slides, if we can put those up.
Mike's off.
Oh, thank you.
Right.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Nope. Maybe use.
Okay, Gilbert, I'm
Sure,
stealing,
go ahead.
borrowing your mic.
As a defense attorney would, I know.
Words matter, right? As any attorney knows. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Caroline Goodson. I am a public defender. I have been a public defender for 17 years. And in that position, I have practiced in every assignment you can imagine: misdemeanors, juvenile felonies, serious felonies. And for the last 4 years, I was one of the persons who founded the Rapid Diversion Program and have been helping run it for the Public Defender's Office. So I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about mental health diversion from the defense perspective, as well as the Rapid Diversion Program. Next slide. So I also have a lot of information up here. I do not expect to go through it with you. You can read it, but what I wanted you to know from the defense perspective is how valuable this statute was. As someone who practiced before the statute, I can't tell you how frustrating it was to have a mentally ill client and have nothing that you could do but go to trial or to see that person go to prison. And I can tell you many stories. I remember practicing in Pasadena court for several years, and I would pick up the morning custody list and see a client's name who I knew. And that would happen at least every few weeks. And it was so disheartening because you could just see in that revolution of people coming in and out, and no one's ever actually solving the issue. And so the creation of the mental health diversion statute is something really near and dear to most public defenders' hearts, because it presented an avenue in which we could actually ask for diversion. And it set out these requirements that were very specific, and it set out specific ways and means to do it. And it really was a deal breaker in terms of defense for the public defenders and for our clients. Next slide. And what it really did was it allowed pre-plea diversion. And so basically it suspends the case so that the client can have a chance to get treatment in exchange for their case to get dismissed. That's a huge incentive, I can tell you. Even for your mentally ill clients, it's a huge incentive for them. But it also gives some leeway to the prosecution because the case does remain open while the client completes diversionary terms. Next slide. And this process, I can tell you, has, as I said, been a wonderful thing. But I also want to let you know about how also it can be difficult. And from my perspective, this is something that I don't think that a lot of lay people realize is how involved the process is to get mental health diversion. I hear a lot of people say often, like, why is this taking so long? My public defender must be so busy. Yes, we're busy, but it's also just a very time-consuming process. And you can see from this slide how many different steps. I tried to narrow it down and I could not do it because there's just so much involved and each one needs to be done. Whether it's gathering information, that takes time. And that's something where I'll talk to you a little bit in a minute about how you can help. But gathering it, our clients are not always the best, information sources. And so it really is, it can be a struggle. Appointing a 730 doctor, we need to have a doctor appointed as to diversion. That takes anywhere from 1 month that's the best case scenario to 6 months if you need a specialty doctor. That's just to get, of course, that is just to get a doctor appointed. First step, right? Once you have a doctor appointed, you're then talking about having to wait for them to write the report. Once they have the report, you need to then find the plan. And this is where you're going to rely on, SENS or DMH or other, DHS. You're going to rely, but there's lots of wait lists. Then you need to have the diversion motion filed and then an argument in court. And if you're lucky, hopefully your DA submits. This is a long process. And so when you hear it takes a while, it's not because your public defender is not trying and not caring. It really takes a while, this process. Next slide. And so this is one of the reasons why we've seen a lot of specialty diversion courts pop up to kind of deal with this process and see if there are certain subsets of cases in which we can either shorten or improve this process. And so some of these programs, I'm not going to go through them because we have other speakers who can address them, but FISMIS for mentally incompetent, or ODR, who populates, more of the acute mental illness, the collaborative courts, and then my program, Rapid Diversion Program. So I do want to emphasize many cases still go through the traditional diversion process. These programs are all just meant to address certain subsets of that process. Next slide. So the history of the Rapid Diversion Program, you may not know much about it, but it's actually become quite a large program. We were founded in 2019. We received a grant from the MacArthur Foundation, and they said, here's some money. Can you collaboratively think of things to do to improve the diversion process? And so we worked together with the DA's office, the city attorney's office, with DMH, with all sorts of different groups, including community groups like Exodus Recovery and Project 180. And the idea was, what can we do to make this process better for a subset of our clients? And so what we did, and I want to mention here that we started in one court, and we really wanted to first have this proof of concept. We could do this. And based on that success, the Justice, Care, and Opportunities Division, JCOD, did pick up our program and has expanded it. We are now in 7 different courthouses. We just opened up in Pasadena last month, which was very exciting for me in a very circular way, having practiced there. But the idea is twofold. One, there has to be a certain set of criminal charges we can all agree should be diverted. And that was collaboratively decided, which I have to say is a public defender really mind-blowing, realizing we can work together on this. And then secondly, we needed to embed staff in the courts, and that includes clinicians and navigators. So the day that they come in for their arraignment, we can actually get them seen, get a diagnosis, get a plan. Remember that whole process I told you that's so lengthened that takes like a month to 2 months? Being able to cut that process and really get immediate results was huge. And then lastly, to provide case management, which I will talk to you about in a minute. But I just want to really emphasize here that this was not meant to solve everything. This was meant specifically to help lower to medium acuity clients. We really wanted to address and also lower to medium types of crimes. The idea being here is, why are we waiting till it's an attempted murder? Why aren't we picking this case up, this client up earlier? Let's be preventive, right? That's the idea. And so we intentionally are not, looking for every case. This isn't a solution to everything. It's a solution to, let's get involved early and make a difference. And so we are purposely picking up those claims. We are purposely picking up lower acuity. We are, again, why are we waiting until it's really, really, difficult to treat our clients? Let's help them when we see things going on and can make a difference. Next slide. What do we do? Well, beyond just having that immediate assessment, linkage, diversion, what we really do is the case management. And I really, for a public defender, that's really been a big difference for me. I can tell you, because the public defenders, we know it's not just about getting diversion, it's about getting them to the end, right? Getting them through diversion, getting them continuing with all the services. And that's what a case manager can do. And you can see all the different things. I want to just give you a few examples so you can hear the real world. It could be anything from, I had a client who was, did a year in a program and was so stable, wanted to get their first job and didn't have shoes for a job interview. Something as simple as, for example, having a client who was on SSI, wasn't going to get a job, but just finally got their Section 8 housing and needed help moving in. Or something as simple as a client is not able to access medication and they're left having to struggle with the system on their own. And instead, they have someone who can walk them in and help them get medication. Those are the simple things, having a person there with you through your diversion, that make a difference. And I'm going to go to the next slide. I'm going to quickly just show you that I can tell you that this week we're reaching our 2,000 diversion. That is a huge number. I'm very excited to be there. And we have had about 600 cases dismissed so far. Of the 600, about only 5% have had recidivism. That's huge to me. That to me is, when I look at that difference in our clients, I don't see them coming back. And what that means to me is that there's something right. I'm going to say, I do honestly think that case management piece is huge, because we really do need to give them all the services. We need to think of them as a whole person with holistic care, which means addressing everything in their lives. I want to just end with the last piece on public defenders. Mark had asked me to quickly speak on this. Next slide. Communicating with the public defender. Documentation, we talked about that briefly. Please, if you have anything, give it to your public defender. We need those histories. We trust them. They're helpful to us in recreating and creating a plan. So if you have that information, please rely on our knowledge. I can tell you, I'm one of the persons who goes around the county training people, and our attorneys, they know which programs are meant. So they have this knowledge. So don't worry. They know this information about all these programs. And then lastly, be patient. This takes a while. I know it's unfortunate, but at the same time, there is a process here. Call your public defender. I can't promise they're going to talk to you. Remember, they have attorney-client, privileges. But at the same time, we do appreciate hearing from you, and we are trying our best in the system that we have. Thank you.
Now, Dr. Clemens from Office of Diversion and Reentry.
Hello, thanks for having me. I am a little about myself. I'm a physician by training, but I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm an internal medicine doctor. And I've been in this role as interim director for almost 2 years, I feel like. And it was supposed to be a short stint. We are in the process of still recruiting. So if you know good people who want to lead ODR, please refer them to me or let me know. I oversee ODR, but also Housing for Health. So I'm the director of community programs for Los Angeles County. So housing and justice work that's delivered on the healthcare side. Really, it's health, right? Delivering health is all sort of under my purview. So it gives you a little bit of background. So ODR really is it's one of the, we could call it specialized programs that's really in the business of taking people living with serious mental illness and moving them to the community. And as was sort of stated earlier, we work in very specialized ways with the courts, and there's a couple of programs that I'll go through, but it's really about moving people into the community with treatment, into recovery. That's really the focus of ODR, and really trying to do it as quickly as possible. And so we have funding from AB 109, the Care First Community Investment Fund, MHSA, or Mental Health Service Act dollars, and the Department of State Hospital funding coming in to support our programs. And then really sort of the areas that we work are pre-arrest diversion, mental health diversion, and community-based competency restoration. So those are the three big buckets, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Really, the key to ODR in our minds is that we move people out with housing and with wraparound supports that are delivered in a field-based way. So it's not just housing, but it's supportive housing. So we have case managers on site, we have nurses at many of our sites, we have occupational therapists, really focused on independence and keeping people safely in the community. And then we provide psychiatry on site and are actively moving to even physical health care into the sites. But where we don't have physical health care available, we connect very closely with primary care providers. I'm a primary care provider myself at Martin Luther King, and I've seen ODR participants come into the clinic with their case manager. So very much that accompaniment. It's really it's trying to provide that wraparound support for the individual. ODR is expanding. Fortunately, we went many years without a lot of expansion, and thanks to support from NAMI and Mark and many others, we were able to get the funding to expand. We have increased 300 slots, which are the way we sort of measure, because we move people from interim to permanent, so 300 sort of slots for people to have that opportunity since June, and we have almost 2,400 slots coming over the next 4 years. And so not all ODR programs are permanent supportive housing, but we will have 4,700 permanent supportive housing slots in that time. And so I think it speaks a little bit to what Gilbert spoke about. This is permanent, right? People have housing, they have this sort of services on an ongoing basis. We're working with housing and justice partners to expand as quickly as possible. I'm sure we would all want to expand more quickly, but there's obviously a million things that we need to do, from standing up housing to working with our justice partners, including the ones here, to move people through the process more quickly. And we're working with county partners, including DMH, to sort of really improve our coordination, because we do have people that need higher levels of care, and we sort of have people shift and into our substance use system as well, treatment system as well. So I want to highlight a few points for you in terms of overview of ODR program, and we can kind of walk through that. So pre-arrest diversion, our big program is LEAD. It stands for, and they've changed the name, so Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion was where it started. It's a national model where we work closely with police departments to identify people at the point of arrest. So instead of arresting the individual, especially individuals that have multiple touches with the justice system, they have the opportunity for wraparound case management support, very similar to what we have in permanent housing, in lieu of that arrest. And so it's a pre-arrest diversion program. We're also, they've changed the name to Letting Everyone Advance with Dignity. And it's the idea that we don't want to just work with law enforcement partners, but we can also take referrals just directly in from our communities, from community partners and those sorts of things. And so we're not only working with law enforcement in that realm. So LEAD works in the following areas in LA: unincorporated East LA, Hollywood, Rampart, which includes MacArthur Park, Temple, and Echo Park areas, South LA, and Long Beach. And those are the areas that we've currently, we operate in. We work with really individuals that have had, that primarily stay in those areas, first of all, and have frequent law enforcement contact, including citations, arrests, incarceration in 12 months. Often, obviously the underlying issues here are systemic racism, poverty, unmet substance use, and mental health treatment. And so those are the things that we look for. And really those who are falling through the cracks of our traditional system. So many of these folks don't trust our hospitals and clinics. They don't go, right? And so there's no real engagement point. And so these teams really work in the community level to engage folks and get them connected to care, instead of putting them through the justice system where they have no hope of that happening. And so for this program, LEAD is voluntary. It needs to be, the individual needs to choose to participate. And obviously there's issues with sort of talking to family members without consents, but we will take referrals. I have the email of our director. She said, give it to you all. But I think probably the easiest way to do it, and if you want to come up, if you have a specific referral, I'll give you the email of our director, but you can just go to our website. It's dhs.lacounty.gov. dhs.lacounty.gov, and there's a contact button at the top right-hand corner. Oh, sure. I can also send it out. We can probably dhs.lacounty.gov. And there's a contact us button at the top. And there's a form. And if you scroll down to Office of Diversion Reentry, you can sort of say you have a referral and we'll call you. Don't put information of family members and things in there. Like, just let us know you want to talk to us and someone will call you and we can sort of take those referrals. But generally speaking, we take the referrals from law enforcement and from community-based partners and things on the LEAD program. So we've talked about that. The other programs are ODR housing, and then our felony incompetent to stand trial and misdemeanor incompetent to stand trial diversion, or sort of community-based competency restoration programs. So for these programs, I'll just walk through the eligibility and we can talk a little bit about some of the supports. They look very similar, and so I'll talk about some of the differences. So if you're identified as incompetent to stand trial with a felony arrest or charge, the FIST program, it's a partnership with the Department of State Hospitals. So in lieu of going to the state hospital, you have an opportunity to go to our community and be restored to competency there. It's essentially a 2-year program. And then after that, there is not a permanent supportive housing opportunity immediately attached to the program. However, we move as many of these folks as possible into our ODR housing program. So to give the folks that need it the opportunity. We also work to get them housing. Some of them reunify with their families. There's a lot of other options, obviously, as people get restored to competency. We're also developing acute and subacute beds, so the higher level of care beds for these folks, so we can get them out of jail sooner. A lot of folks sort of wait a little bit longer just to get out, because in our community right now we have, as in most of our system, we have a lot of interim housing beds that have a fairly high level of function, but the really high level of care we don't have as many of. And so we're working with DMH in partnerships to try to create more of these beds, as is the whole state or the world, it seems. And so that's one of the sort of programs that is expanding pretty significantly in the coming years. The misdemeanor incompetent to stand trial program has changed very significantly after SB 371. Senate
Bill 517.
Yeah, Senate Bill, yeah. And so people are mostly released. We do still have a diversion program, and it moves mostly into interim housing. We've had a lot of struggles in more recent times because people are released much earlier, and they're hard to sort of connect to the services that we have in our community. We have a lot of people leaving our structures a lot more. So we're really working closely with our correctional service providers to get that connection and that handoff to be much more warm. But that's that program. It's about 203 beds that we manage there. And then ODR housing is our largest program. We've talked about the 4,700 bed permanent supportive housing target. People come out to interim housing with the type of wraparound supports that we talked about, and then they move to permanent supportive housing. And we are also trying to develop acute and subacute beds. We haven't really started this process with our justice partners, but we're hoping there's an opportunity to divert people to these higher level beds and then step them down to the right level of care. So this will be a new sort of approach that we haven't done significantly before. So, and so that's kind of exciting. So eligibility, we went through earlier. I won't necessarily rehash it here. So referrals for this program, also very much working with your defense attorney is the best way to do it. And most people who have public defenders and APD, the programs are very aware of these, the program, ODR as a program. If you have a private attorney, then you can use that same referral concept that I talked about. So dhs.lacounty.gov, and then hit the contact us button, and we're happy to take referrals that way as well. And so I will stop there and then hand it back for questions.
So, Malik, we're glad you made it.
Yes, sorry.
So this is Malik Tate. He is the Mental Health Program Director for the DMH Court Linkage Program. I have a very soft spot in my heart for court linkage because it saved my son from going to prison 20 years ago. So we love court linkage in NAMI. And Malik is going to tell you a little bit about that, and then we'll take some questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Mark. So again, do we have those slides that we can put up perhaps?
Slides handy.
Are these? Oh, perfect. Thank you. So again, thank you for having me, inviting me, Mark. I appreciate it. I'm Malik Tate, Program Manager for a DMH program called the Court Linkage Program. Next slide, please. We were established back in the 1980s, about the mid 80s, and it's a collaboration between us and the Superior Court of Los Angeles, and it incorporates a no wrong door philosophy by offering the courtroom as an entry point to mental health services. Think of us as sort of a a portal or doorway, if you will, to mental health services for someone who is along the continuum of their criminal court process, anywhere from just after arrest through those who for some programs have been sentenced who have been sentenced and maybe on probation. There are 6 sub-programs to the court linkage program. So under court linkage, there are different programs, how an individual qualifies for those programs and exactly the services they're offered through them vary slightly. And so it's not important to go into detail for this discussion, but the idea is that for all of those programs, our main goal is to screen individuals for mental health services, to determine an appropriate level of care for those individuals, and then to do the work on the back end to actually get them referred and linked to those services. Next slide, please. So my clinicians, we are across the county of Los Angeles. There are 23 criminal courts that we'd like to cover. We're covering 19 at this point. We'll soon be covering the other 3 after we complete another round of hiring. But we are in most courts. The exceptions are Inglewood, Torrance, and East LA. And my clinicians are actually in the courts. They report to work at those courts. That is their office. And so those folks are there to do those screenings and link folks to mental health services. Some of the other things that our court liaisons do, you see on your screen there. It's primarily to link individuals to appropriate county-based mental health services, to advocate for mental health treatment, to facilitate communication between our justice partners, those folks at the jail, treatment providers, and the court. It's to participate in release planning, coordination with jail care transition staff. Those are the folks. There are essentially 2 groups of mental health clinicians at the court, or excuse me, at the jails. One of them handles discharge planning, that's care transitions. The other engages in treating individuals who are detained at the jail. So we ensure submission of progress notes to the court. Those who are on diversion, the judge expects to be updated on the progress of that individual in treatment on a regular basis. And so that requires some legwork to go to providers and get that information and then give that information to the court. We also provide support, guidance, and education to loved ones and other invested parties. And we provide education to bench officers and attorneys. We sort of act as mental health consultants there in the court. And so we provide information that may be specific to diagnoses or treatment modalities or the various places that an individual might receive services. So we give that information to our justice partners. Next slide, please. Who can refer to mental health court linkage program? It's just about anyone. Most of our referrals, the bulk, come from an individual's legal counsel. For us, defense attorneys and or public defenders and alternate public defenders comprise the vast majority of our referrals. But also judges and DAs may consult with us. Family members and significant others of clients. We have a number of people who will call us and, hey, my loved one was arrested a week ago. They have a case out of Long Beach court. What can you do to help us link them to services? Clients themselves will often call and say, a judge has ordered me to get mental health services, but there wasn't much in the way of telling me how or where I could get those services. And so they'll call us and ask for assistance being linked to those services. We work with treatment providers, both directly operated and those who are contractors of the Department of Mental Health and others, as well as community collaborative courts. Those are probation-driven courts where an individual has been sentenced, and we can assist to refer those folks to mental health services as well. SEND staff also refer to us and work with us. Their expertise, their DHS staff and their expertise is for those who have substance use disorders. And so we work closely with them in many of our courts. They may have an individual that's referred to them who is believed is primarily dealing with a substance use disorder, but they interview the person and say, hey, this seems like there may be a mental health or mental illness component to this person's presentation. And so they'll bring us in and we sort of go back and forth in that way, and sometimes collaborate to decide what the best treatment plan might be. Next slide, please. So the types of settings we utilize, what you see on the screen there is sort of a representation. It's not comprehensive in any way, but it's sort of a representation of our continuum of care from least restrictive to most restrictive, right? So we may encounter individuals, do our screening and determine that they would best receive services in our least restrictive setting, which is just outpatient treatment. They can go to one of our directly operated clinics or another outpatient clinic, and that's for someone who has the ability to walk into, on a regular basis, walk into a clinic and engage in services. For those who may not have that ability, for whom we think that's not the greatest plan, we may need to go to them to provide the services. So that next level FSP stands for full service partnership, and that's where a team goes to an individual in the community and provides those services wherever that person may be. And then you see sort of successive levels of treatment that increase in their level. So enriched residential treatment is an example of a type of treatment where the person lives in a place and receives intensive mental health services in that location. Those are unlocked facilities, however, all the way up to a program like Ala Vista, and that's a locked skilled nursing facility for those for mentally ill offenders. And my program has 50 beds that we're able to use at Ala Vista, as well as River Community, that is a residential facility for those who have a co-occurring mental health and substance use disorder. Next slide, please. So there can be challenges in the work that we do. An individual who is not compliant with mental health, or who is not compliant with, or who refuses mental health services, is someone that we typically are not able to treat. There are other programs that might be more appropriate. Many of you may have heard or know of AOT, or assisted outpatient treatment. That's a civil court program where we're able to engage a judge to have a person potentially ordered to services. I think many of you heard of a bit about Care Court earlier today. Will be starting soon. That's another program that might be able to engage an individual who is not voluntary. But our program is for individuals who say that they would like to, who are open to being linked to those services as a diversion to continuing down the criminal court path. Folks who have private insurance, can be a significant impediment. The services that we offer, FSP, for instance, where a team goes to the person, typically is not something that's available through private insurance. Unfortunately, those who are registered sex offenders or for whom arson has been charged, or they have that history, they can be very difficult to place in housing. Many of our licensed residential facilities, they are under community care licensing, and if someone accused of arson was to burn a facility down, for instance, I mean, above and beyond the risk to life and property, they could be out of business. Those who are psychiatrically unstable, HOH just refers to those individuals in custody who are in high observation housing. There's actually a mental health, a hospital inside of the jail, and those who are just below that level of instability are in high occupancy housing. That can pose a risk. An agency that takes an individual for treatment wants to know that they are at least at a minimal level of psychiatric stability, and that they are medication compliant. That can be an impediment. Some folks will say, okay, so yes, I'd like treatment as a diversion, but I don't want to take the medication anymore. And so that can pose a significant challenge for us. Those with histories of severe violence towards others, in particular, if they've been in congregate care and they've had significant difficulties, those folks can be hard to house And all of this I've discussed thus far, it requires the consent of an individual's legal counsel, right? So the person's public defender, or bar panel attorney, or private attorney, they are sort of driving the bus in terms of my unit's ability to get involved in a case. So that's something to keep in mind. We're not able to assist. The attorney may say, hey, we have other plans, or this is a person who has little exposure. And so they may be able to be released very soon and not have and not be responsible to the court to complete some mental health course of treatment. And so that there may be other reasons that we're not able to get involved in that case. Next slide, please. How can you refer? We don't have a referral form per se. That number at the top there, that is our main number. You can always call that number and they will connect you to the clinician serving the court where the individual has a case. You can email us at the email address you see there. If you know that individual's attorney, you may be talking with their public defender or other attorney, and you can, and again, if it's a public defender or alternate public defender, we've worked with them for many years, they know us. They typically will, they probably have already reached out to us if it's appropriate that we be involved in that case. It's helpful if you know the court that person has a case out of, as well as the public defender or their attorney and their contact information that can help significantly. You can also contact the Access Center. That's the number you'd call if you want the PET team or the psychiatric mobile response team. It's most often, I think, used for that purpose, but they also provide mental health information of other types. You could call them and say, hey, I'm in a certain area and I'd like to know what services are available in that area. And they can provide that info too. So if you call them up and say, hey, can you connect me with the court linkage folks? They will help you do that. And then of course we have a website, the DMH website. That's the specific address to the court linkage page on that website, but you could also Google mental health court linkage and that will take you to our page. So I'll return this to you, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Malik. So before we take questions, since this is a criminal justice breakout session, when we dial 911 or 988 and officers arrive, we want officers who are highly trained, who understand de-escalation, who want to make sure nobody gets hurt and people get what they need safely. We should give a NAMI thank you to our smart officers from LAPD sitting in the back of the room. Thank you, folks. Thank you, man. That's the kind of police officer we want to show up, is people who really care for people, and they do an amazing job handling really challenged people on the street, and they get them to wherever it is they need to go and do it in a way that's safe for everybody, and that's really important. So our panelists have done a great job. Did anybody have any questions that they would like to ask? Yeah, Debbie?
For families who have a loved one that is in jail somewhere and they want to try to reach the public defender, how do they reach the public defender?
There you go, Carol. I told you somebody would ask you that.
Okay.
Here.
I think this one's me. So you're going to want to find out who specifically is the most important thing. I see that as often as possible. We're a huge organization. There's probably in LA County 700 public defenders. So what I tell people to do is call the main number, find out who is assigned. The person who's at the desk always can tell you who it is. I actually sometimes have to call to find out who's assigned to a case. They'll let you know who's assigned, what their phone number is, and then contact them. And I would suggest, if you can get their email, to contact them by email, because there is a huge inundation of phone calls that comes in. And I've noticed even with myself that if you contact by email, you'll get a better response.
What's the main number?
Sure, I think it's 213-974-2811. I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back there, but yes, I believe that's it. And so call them. That's the central number, but they'll be able to help you for all courthouses.
We're going to give out Trouty's home phone, but the, anybody else have a question? Okay, ma'am?
This might sound like a dumb question, but what is the difference between and the court linkage program that you were talking about? What, are they two different programs, or does the court linkage help you get into the diversion, or what is the difference between what you two represent?
Are you pointing to me?
No,
So and I don't want to speak for ODR, but I think there's a subset of individuals who are ODR clients who are actually diverted. And so what my program does is they oftentimes the folks that sort of wash out of ODR, who are not able to be successful there, will come to my teams to connect them to services. And so, yeah.
You're kind of after her.
Well, Mr. C, do you take any diversion cases, or do you take only cases where people plead? I think that might help her out. Do you take any diversion cases, or do you take only cases where people plead? Okay, so.
Remember when we were talking about that regular diversion process and the people where the public defenders need to find a program? DMH linkage is essential to finding the program for that regular diversion process when it's not a specialized program.
You can get diversion out of DMH. I mean, the person that is trying to get linked can have a diversion grant, or they could also have pled to an offense.
And when you say plead, that means plead guilty?
Yes, guilty.
If a person pleads innocent, what happens to them?
Well, we call it not guilty or guilty. And if they plead not guilty, that means either we go, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. If a person pleads not guilty, that means we either go to trial or we settle the case, or they can also ask for diversion as well, or they can get into the ODR program. There's so many avenues they could take.
I'll get.
I'll be likely going to law school in the fall, next year from now. And thank you. And I'm interested in going into public service, in particular, the criminal justice system, with a keen interest in where the criminal justice system meets the mental health system. And I was just wondering if you can give, career advice, things I should be thinking about between now and being a 1L, 2L, 3L, whatever it might be.
Well, I would simply say, when I was coming up in 1985, 1988, I was headed straight for the public defender's office. And that's where I was going to go until I externed with the DA's office. So I would say for someone like you just coming up, think about getting into both offices when you are when you're in law school, so you'll understand where each side is coming from, and then that'll give you a better decision as to whether to you want to stay with the public defender, you want to go with the DA's office, or if you want to go out on your own and work in the public health space as well.
Just ironically, I am a daughter of a district attorney, and I thought I wanted to be a district attorney, and I interned through their office, and I wasn't sure, and then went to intern at the public defender's office and loved it and found my calling. So same as Gilbert, you won't know until you actually try it and see what each one does.
Yeah, I had noticed a couple of slides back where judges were listed as people who could make a referral. And I'm wondering if mental health support can be a feature of adjudication or sentence.
Because I noticed that slide too. And I know that either side can make a referral. It's probably easier for a judge to do that, maybe. But I've told all of our prosecutors that we should not be making any referrals, because when you do that, it could be misconstrued as interfering with the defense and their client's relationship. And in particular, though, if we thought someone should be considered for mental health diversion or for some of the other mental health programs that we have, I've told them, look, just go and talk to the public defender or the alternate public defender, talk to them about that and see what they may do. Now, if the judge was going to get involved, the judge might call the defense attorney up and say, hey, what about thinking about diversion? And then they'll go from there. Do you have anything to add on that? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. As part of sentencing, a judge can add mental health conditions and often does. But, the goal of, I think, many of us in the system is not to get to point of sentencing. So, but it is an option.
It's me. If it is me, I don't know the answer to that. Do you know the answer to that?
It's okay. It's like you're allowed.
Yeah. I know that we'll generally see juveniles if they've committed an offense, and then we'll be talking about what should happen to them at that point. Should they go to, if we still have a juvenile detention facility now, or if they should go home on some type of program. But I'm not familiar with any other way we could get to the juveniles in our office, unless you're thinking of some kind of specific program. Are you aware of any program?
When I practiced juvenile law back in 2011, there was prosecutions for truancy, but they haven't had them in many years.
Oh, right.
Okay, hi.
Get some people on the other side of the room.
Quick, well, I'm in the ODR program. So I did have a question. I mean, you guys are doing a great job. You guys have helped me numerous times, and now I have my housing, along with the help of Yvonne and NAMI and a lot of people. But I have a question. Kind of like the liaisons they report back and they have a general basis about their clients. Sometimes through the process, like we have housing people representatives, and then you have ODR, and then you have other people like FSP. Is there like a hub that they all go to talk about the client, kind of like the way the court has the liaison to refer back to something if there is a problem with the client, so they don't end up in the hospital or jail or anything like that? Like, is there like a kind of like a website that we're all these people can get together maybe and, fix a problem if the client, just as far as communication is concerned? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think because we work with a lot of contracted community-based providers, and we have partnerships. There definitely are times when we all sort of get on the phone and talk to each other and sort of help. Really, bottom line is to create the best possible outcome for the people we serve, right? So there are those sorts of conversations. There's sort of like case conferences or case discussions that happen constantly, right? All the time, whether one-on-ones or in bigger groups when there's a more complex issue. Does that answer your question, or?
Also, the communication. Let's say something like manager.
Okay, so in our system, it's not so much a website, but every community-based provider has a person, like an ODR doctor or a clinical lead that they can call out to and ask sort of questions. And so it creates some level of standardization. There's a lot of training as a part of the onboarding and a lot of case discussion. So it kind of helps standardize the processes when things come up. So maybe that's something similar, but there isn't really a website where we centralize those things.
So, hey, I just want to add something real quick. Yeah, so just quickly, To your question, again, not a website per se, but depending on the program that we're referring them to, like for instance, Olive Vista and River Community, those two residential programs I talked about, we do have liaisons there so that if there's some issue that could potentially lead to that person being remanded to custody, they're not medication compliant, there may be other issues going on. There are case conferences that occurred where we try to troubleshoot. And for those who are not in those two programs, even if they're in, for instance, our CFCI beds, that's another example of facilities where we send people. Those folks there, if there's an issue going on, they will contact us and say, hey, this is a person that we may request go back to court to have the judge admonish them about things that may be going on. So there are those conversations that do occur, although there's not an actual, like a website per se.
Okay, thank you for the
We're out
opportunity.
of time, so you got to vote.
Okay,
Go ahead.
yeah, actually, my case is different. I'm a victim of crime, and that's why I have mental illness. And my question is where I can find the attorney to help my case, so I can get some compensation.
So we'll talk afterwards.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Are we done?
Yes, yeah.
So I want to thank our panelists for taking time out of their workday to come speak with us today. Thank you. Gilbert Wright, Carolyn Goodson, Dr. Clemens, Malik Tate, thank you very much.